All right, hello everyone. Americans today often take freedom of speech for granted. Not many people realize that the legal protections we're accustomed to today didn't emerge until the middle of the 20th century. Historians have always found it ironic that this was the very moment when media concentration ensured that the vast majority of Americans had no ability to actually use their newfound rights. I would suggest that this is not, in fact, necessarily a coincidence. Recent history shows this, that as digital media has made it more possible for individuals to obtain a mass audience, there's been pushback, and slander laws have been revived to punish people like Alex Jones. I'm going to suggest today that the history of both media censorship and media concentration in the United States have been problematic for democracy, and that the way forward is with programs like V Taiwan that incorporate diverse voices but are set up in such a fashion as to promote agreement rather than conflict. So in a lot of ways, I would say our modern media ecosystem is most like that of the early republic. This was a time when printing presses were very affordable. Artisan printers filled homemade sheets with rumor that they heard on the street, and partisanship, violent partisanship, was the rule. The result was our first and much more violent cancel culture. It was very common during this period for writers to be challenged to duels for their claims or to just be assaulted in the street. And this culminates in 1798 when President John Adams passes a law criminalizing criticism of the federal government. Famously, Thomas Jefferson defeats Adams and allows the Sedition Act to expire. However, he quietly encourages his own people to pursue cases against spurious claims in state courts. As time went on, censorship only became more prevalent in America and came to fall disproportionately on marginalized people. In the 1830s, Andrew Jackson led a campaign against the abolitionist press. He barred abolitionist newspapers from being distributed in the South, and his rhetoric inspired a series of anti-abolitionist riots in which abolitionist writers were murdered, as in the case of Elijah Lovejoy, or assaulted. In 1873, Congress passed the Comstock Act, which banned immoral literature in the United States. This lasted for several decades, and over 150 million tons of literature was burned under this act, including scientific material on contraceptives, for example. At the same time, there is a parallel story in the United States of increasing media concentration under commercial firms which had an incentive not to alienate anyone. The idea of an objective press is born in the 1830s when you have papers in New York City that have the resources to publish daily editions. The consequence, however, was that media became prohibitively expensive. In 1835, it cost about $500 to buy a newspaper in New York City. By the beginning of the 20th century, it cost nearly $1 million. In the 1920s, media concentration becomes even a bigger issue when the FCC divides up the radio spectrum and gives a preference to large corporations that can promise well-produced programs. And you do, during this period, see a rapid drop in political partisanship that only seems to reemerge when the media ecosystem becomes more diverse. We sometimes look back idealistically at this period of concentration as a time when media was responsible. However, in reality, this was a period in which the monopolization of news allowed for conspiracies of silence and also for citizen disengagement. So this is a period, for example, when a professional taboo develops against reporting on the foibles of powerful men. When LBJ was asked by reporters why we were at war in Vietnam, he pulled out his penis and said, "This is why." And yet the public knew nothing about LBJ's persistent exhibitionism or JFK's infidelities. More problematic, the news media during this period suppressed news of American foreign wars, bad news. 9 years after the beginning of the Vietnam War, 2/3 of Americans still reported having little knowledge of it. So I have to go, but I just want to say this is why I think networks like V-Taiwan promise a better way forward than these two historical trends of concentration and censorship.
Thank you, Christopher.